Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. And since we are live, also with Kevin Noon. Tom, how's it going?
I like that the way you set that up makes it sound like you and I can't be trusted to go live without adult supervision. It's like, well, if we're going to go live, we have to have Kevin here. Otherwise, our mothers wouldn't sign the permission slip to let us be on the podcast.
Ooh, we should do a podcast from a bus. Kevin, how's it going?
Good, I guess. I just all of a sudden had memories of elementary school and being on the bus and everything else and having to beat up nerds like you. Yeah.
That's why my mom never sent me to school with lunch money. But it is good. We did schedule the show exactly for the Wednesday 12 noon sirens going off. So that's perfect.
Didn't even
But
didn't even think about that. But as is canon, it is always
mhm,
noisy when we do these
mhm.
shows.
But the reason we're here is we are getting ready for the live reveal of the new Big Ten schedule for the 2022 season. It's the only place to see it is right here on television, unless you've also looked at all of the school websites where they have already put them up. Is that correct? So, um, yeah, the entire schedule, except for the non-conference and the end of the schedule next year for Ohio State, is it's like all the same teams, but you see it there now. So Ohio State starts at home with Notre Dame, Arkansas State, then Toledo, and then they play Wisconsin at home instead of going to Michigan State. The next week is Rutgers instead of going to Penn State. Then they go to Michigan State instead of hosting Rutgers. Then they have their off week on October 15th. Then the next week they are playing Iowa, and then Halloween weekend they go to Penn State, followed by a road trip to Northwestern. Then they are home against Indiana, which was supposed to be Wisconsin. And then after Indiana, they go to Maryland on November 19th, which was what the schedule always had. And then, of course, the following week is the Michigan home game, provided Michigan doesn't choose to not play that game. And then, of course, the week after that is the Big Ten championship game. So there you have it, a brand new schedule. And I think the key, Tom, that I take away from it is they have, and one of the reasons for this was the COVID year and trying to fix some things apparently, but separating the Michigan State and the Penn State road games, I think, is pretty key.
Yeah, this is something you look at it, and the official reason given for this was, uh, you know, 2020 adjustments, and I think games that were lost in 2020. And I think Ohio State's schedule shifting around is just sort of a byproduct of other changes they've made because they're not changing opponents for Ohio State, but I think other schools are changing opponents. But for Ohio State, I think you have to say this schedule is a little bit more favorable than the previous one. You look at the earlier one, and you're going back to back at Michigan State, at Penn State to open Big Ten play. That's one of those things that the SEC would never do to one of its potential playoff contenders, and the Big Ten just somehow stumbles into doing, whether accidentally or on purpose, just constantly for some stupid reason. Now you've sort of avoided that. You've got, Wisconsin is surrounded by Toledo and Rutgers. At Michigan State is surrounded by Rutgers and a bye week. Yeah, they've got Iowa and Penn State. Iowa and a trip to Penn State back to back. That's probably the biggest kind of question mark on here. And then back to back road games at Penn State and at Northwestern. But as far as those things go, like it is not an absolutely perfect schedule for Ohio State, but really it seems like it sets up pretty well where you don't have anything that's like a real obvious landmine like you do in the years, a couple, I think coming up in a year or two, they end up with Penn State and then a road trip to Michigan at the end of the year. And I was like, why would you do that to one of your, kind of banner carrier programs? This year that schedule really is, I don't think Ohio State's going to have too many complaints.
Kevin.
Yeah, I've been looking at the schedule here as you guys have been talking, and I think breaking up that Michigan State, Penn State, both of those supposed to be on the road the 24th of September and the 1st. I think that is huge. I like moving up the open week 1 week from the 22nd to the 15th coming out of that Michigan State game. I just think that that's a good spot to be able to kind of take a little self inventory, get healthy before you have a 3 game stretch of Iowa, at Penn State, at Northwestern. I think that one of the things, and this isn't a change, but as you look at the schedule, and as I read in the chat from RK, 4 road games. Yeah, only 4 road games. And, certainly that helps when your whole non-conference schedule is at home. You've got the 3 there, and this is, we know with 9 conference games, it's 5-4, and this is 5 at home and 4 on the road. And even with that, Ohio State still does have that back-to-back trip, but there'd been some whispers out there that maybe Illinois would get put back on the schedule and that Northwestern would drop off, and that didn't happen. So we'll get to go see Evanston, hopefully, and everything that's there. They have like a famous hot dog stand. I can see a Scoop Eats there already over there at Mustard's. Not to be confused with Mean Mr. Mustard's for all of you old timers like us. But I think it's a good schedule. I think that it's going to be challenging enough. I think that there are going to be some points though where Ohio State's going to be able to get the youth on the team in certain positions some experience as well. So I don't see this as any sort of net loss. I'll say that for certain.
If you guys go to big10.org, you can see the entire Big Ten schedule, and I'm looking at it right now. And Michigan also has 4 road games next year. Purdue, 6 road games. They have the year where they get the 5 road Big Ten games, and also they have a game at Syracuse, and they're going to have to make up some money there. But the Ohio State schedule here, I think you've obviously the start with Notre Dame, you've got to be ready to go at that point. But then you've got Arkansas State and Toledo to get ready for Wisconsin. Then you've got, I was almost going to say Rutgers break before the Michigan State game. I don't know how much of a break it is, but you do at least get the break between Michigan State and Iowa. And then you go then you go to Penn State after Iowa. So it's just like this year they had 6, and then the bye week, and then 6 games, which they have again next year. But I'm with Kevin. I think that's a good break. It's also honestly 2 pretty decent schedules, because the first half you have Notre Dame and Wisconsin and Michigan State. Then the second half you have Iowa, Penn State, and Michigan, and a trip to Chicago in there. So it's at least 2 entertaining halves, Tom, of a full schedule.
Yeah, and with the context of the 4 road games this year, as you mentioned, like there you can have it line up where you've got 4 road games, you can have it line up where you've got 6 road games. 2023 Ohio State does have 6 road games because they return that Notre Dame series, and they have the year where they have the 5 road games. That's 2023. So that'll be next year. But yeah, this year there are not any like long dead periods. This year between the Oregon game and it felt like basically the Oregon game through the bye week. It was like 4 or 5 weeks where it was like, well, this is going to be real boring, because it was Tulsa and then Akron and then Rutgers and then a bye week and Maryland.
You have Maryland in there too. You have Rutgers, Maryland back to back.
It was like 5-6 weeks in a row where it's just like, oh, this is terrible. You've got Notre Dame. It should be a very interesting game. Wisconsin should be an interesting game. At Michigan State's an interesting game. Iowa's an interesting game. At Penn State's an interesting game. Northwestern, Indiana, Maryland in the lead up to Michigan is not a bad thing. And those are teams that are, there's not a guarantee that any of them are going to be great this year, but they are at least, you have a chance of, if you hit one of them on the upswing, playing an 8-win team. But heading into the Michigan game, I think Ryan Day is probably pretty happy with heading into the Michigan game without a team that's going to be you really have to focus super, super hard to get ready for at Maryland. You have to focus super, super hard to get ready for at Northwestern, because those are all teams that Ohio State can just out talent. So you have potentially basically a full month to really focus on that Michigan game. And I just have this weird feeling that they are going to be fairly focused on the Michigan game this year.
I'm looking at all of the different bye weeks and what Michigan's schedule is. They do have a bye week between Penn State and Michigan State, both of which go to Ann Arbor. And then in the run up to Ohio State, so they have Michigan State at home, then they're at Rutgers, then they have Nebraska at home, Illinois at home, and then they're at Ohio State. So the Big Ten has kind of given them a break as they have with Ohio State. The Northwestern road game for Ohio State, you never know what you're going to get with Northwestern. I mean, they could be this could be the year where they're good again and they're a 10-win team. So that could be something. And is it a night game at that point? That is November 5th, so probably
No.
not.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, but it's one of those things where it could be iffy until they actually get on the field and you see the talent disparity, and it's like, oh yes, okay, 49-17, and they cover by 15 points. But it is, yeah, I like Ohio State's schedule, and there's enough interest there, and I don't know about going to Maryland that late in the season. I think but they've done it before. They did that in 2018. That was the
Right.
52-51 before the Michigan game. So I'm just looking here. I mean, I don't, I don't have any like, the Big Ten screwed them or
Mm.
anything like that, which is unfortunate because it is always fun to rip on the Big Ten. I don't know. Kevin, anything else that strikes you about the schedule or anything at all as we start to get into some questions, maybe?
Yeah, I'm trying now that I've taken the schedule off of my front page. I'm trying to pull it up somewhere else so I can just see it. I do agree that it does set up nicely for Ohio State having the month of November to prepare for that team up north, even though we know that they are currently preparing for that team up north as we speak in some way, shape, or form. Um, I think it's interesting getting Wisconsin that early in the season because Wisconsin was a team last year that really, to start the year was horrible and then kind of rounded into shape at the end of the year and then ended with a colossal thud. Wisconsin's a team I would much rather play September 24th than November 12th, which was previously scheduled, because by that point they probably have figured out who they are, and that's just a tough game to play against in terms of what their style is. So now to move that there and replace that with Indiana, and Indiana was just hapless last season. So, I would expect the Hoosiers to bounce back a little bit, but certainly not be that type of team that's been playing Ohio State within 10 points year in and year out. Maryland, certainly the road trip there, breakfast taco meat and the tiny road locker room to where the players have to get taped up on the field because the road locker room is so crappy there. And that'll be fun on November 19th, but that game didn't move. But I think it's a good schedule. There have been some questions about the whiteout at Penn State, but I'll kind of wait till we get into our question phase to kind of dovetail into that a little more.
A couple of quick things on week one before we
Mhm.
jump too far down the list. Penn State has to go to Purdue in week one, which is like, ooh, that's as I probably don't need to tell an audience of Ohio State fans, like, yeah, that might be dicey. And obviously Ohio State hosting Notre Dame week one, that'll be the headliner. But Tony, do you know who Iowa plays week one? The week before the Iowa State game?
I the week before the Iowa State game.
Week one.
I'm sorry, I was looking at wrong eye. I was looking at Illinois. Yeah, it's is that the Jackrabbits of
Yes,
South Dakota?
South Dakota State. South Dakota State coming in the week before the Iowa State game. Tony, I think I speak for all of us when I say what could possibly go wrong for Kirk Ferentz in week one, hosting an FCS team that is almost certainly going to beat him and ruin his season before they even get to the Iowa State game.
But they'll still be Iowa State, so it'll be okay.
And he'll
Yeah.
still be Big Ten Coach of the Year.
And the Nebraska has North Dakota week one, which I looked at and went, oh Lord, and then it was like, oh, it's North Dakota, not North Dakota State. North Dakota is they were 5-6 this year, so not quite as big a red flag, but yeah, that's that.
Don't forget
And
that
then
week 0 game for Nebraska.
they go to Ireland to play Northwestern week one, and then they come home and play North Dakota at home, and then they play. I'm trying to remember if that's Georgia Southern's. I think
I was
that's
going to
Georgia
ask you
Southern's new
which
logo.
logo.
Yeah, that's Georgia Southern's new logo, not Georgia State. Yeah, it's like, oh boy. Yeah, there's a couple like, oh, why would you do that to yourself on this list?
Well, then what the Big Ten has done to Nebraska at the end of the schedule, which their
Oh,
last three
geez.
games are
Oh,
at
oh,
Michigan, home to Wisconsin, and then the Friday after Thanksgiving game at Iowa. The Big
They're
Ten is
still pissed about 2020. They're still pissed about
absolutely.
2020.
I
and before that they play Minnesota
mhm.
in that game. I mean, in that rivalry game. I mean,
I don't know how much of their
that's
schedule
brutal.
has changed. I wonder if a lot has changed. Like, what if it was really easy beforehand, and now they've done this to them?
Yeah, that is brutal. And they have the return date with. I mean, honestly, that does not. Let's run down the Nebraska schedule real quick, because this is like, oh, if this is the year Scott Frost is going to save himself, like, I have bad news. You open you open with Northwestern in Ireland, which is a game they should win, but it's in Ireland, so Lord only knows. Then you come home the next week. You don't have a bye. You come home the next week, play North Dakota. Then you play Georgia Southern. Then you play Oklahoma at home, which, like, that. I mean, that's a big shrug emoji game. That's one they might be able to steal and kind of
Mhm.
solidify his job. The first year Brent Venables at Oklahoma, with the entire program transferring out. Then a bye week, home for Indiana, at Rutgers and at Purdue back to back. That's because those are two games that are winnable, but you're probably not winning both of them back to back. Then another bye week, then home for Illinois, and then you close Minnesota at Michigan, Wisconsin at Iowa. Like, that is a schedule that sets up for North Nebraska to start, 6-2 or 5-2, and then finish with like 4 straight losses and absolutely get Scott Frost fired. Like, that is what that schedule is right there.
That's why you have to sign him to he has to sign a long-term deal when they're 4-0. After that big win over Oklahoma, get them locked in. Have Trev Albert get them locked in, and then and then the bottom can fall out. The anything else on these schedules strike you guys? You talked about week one. Rutgers goes to BC, Boston College in week one. That's not uninteresting.
Is Michigan
Not,
State playing the Washington football team? I know that's
that's
Western
what I
Michigan,
thought.
but that looks like the
Western Michigan,
Washington
yes,
football team logo.
Playing the
yes.
Washington football team, and then 2 weeks later playing the actual Washington Huskies football team.
I mean, can we talk for a moment about Michigan's schedule, which is like,
It's bad.
are you playing a Mountain West schedule?
Mhm.
Open with a first-year coach at Colorado State, a Hawaii team that should have a first-year coach if they can scrape together the money to fire
If they have a team.
Todd Graham. First-year coach UConn, Jim Mora at UConn. Home for Maryland. Like, if they're not 4-0 with an average scoring margin of +50, then something has gone horribly wrong. And then you're at Iowa, which is always a little dicey.
Mhm.
At Indiana, home for Penn State. I mean, and then a bye week, and then they get Michigan State at home, and then Rutgers, Nebraska, Illinois, and Ohio State. It's like, how many losable games, like even plausibly losable games, are there on that schedule? At Ohio State, home for Michigan State, at home for Penn State, maybe at Iowa. Like, it's like
Yeah, I think Iowa's plausible.
they start the year 8-0.
I mean, the at Iowa is a game that they tend to lose, so I'll go ahead and say that's a possible loss. I'm out on Indiana now. I'm done.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to do something more. I'm no longer believing in you. But I think the Iowa, the Penn State, the Michigan State, the Ohio State are the only four. I mean, should we throw Nebraska in there? I don't know, not yet. No reason to, other than look at their logo. It's Nebraska. So
Mm-hmm.
those 4 games, and you get 2 of them at home, and one of the road games is Iowa. I'm not going to be shocked when they're 11-0 coming into Ohio State. And I last week I saw a tweet from a college football personality that put out his top 5 for 2022, and Michigan was, or his top 20 or whatever, and put Michigan number 5. And I tweeted out that was, I saw it. I didn't remember who it was. Turns out it was Joel Klatt, but I said it. Michigan at 5 is really aggressive, and people are like, "Well, look at their schedule." And my response is, you don't do your preseason rankings based on schedule. I don't.
Mhm.
You do it based on the talent coming back, the talent incoming, transfers, coaches. Like I don't want to hear about how good easy their schedule is. That means nothing to me. I do not like, and I'll let Kevin go after this. I don't like rankings that are trying to be predictions of how the
Mhm.
season is going to go. It's one of my pet peeves of college football rankings. I don't care if you think they're going to go undefeated because of their schedule. Rank them on how good they are, not on ease of schedule. There's rankings for that already.
I'll just kind of circle back to that Iowa game, and we know that there's always that one game at Kinnick that Iowa plays, 6 levels above itself, and I don't know who anybody on Iowa is anymore, to be quite honest. I mean, I know who Spencer Petras is, and I don't know if Iowa fans really want to know who he is because he was average. But that game seems to be the one that could be the early stumbling block for Michigan because the schedule is pretty poor most
Mhm.
of the way. I mean, I'll have my eye on that October 15th game in Ann Arbor against Penn State for certain, as Sean Clifford is in the midst of his 17th year in college. Uh, Only surpassing Ohio State snapper Bradley Robinson, who's returning for his 7th year. Um, yeah, I agree with Tony. I don't necessarily want my rankings to be a predictor. I mean, I know that there are people that like to come out and do some things like that, and then of course we have RJ Young who just puts rankings out just to piss people off. Uh, so I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, and I mean, for the next 2 hours after we're done with this show here in 40, 50, 60 minutes or whatever, I'll be going through the schedule. I'll probably do a way too early blind prediction of what everybody's record is going to be at the end of the season, just so I can go out and predict it. But I'm not going to turn it into a top 25, so don't worry, Tony. You don't have to hate me for that.
You better not. I'm looking for some interesting non-conference games in the Big Ten this year, and there aren't a lot. The biggest ones, of course, are the Nebraska, Oklahoma, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and that's about it. Honestly,
Penn State
Penn
goes to
State
Auburn.
at Auburn.
Yeah.
That was the other
when
one.
when when Rutgers BC makes the list, that kind of shows you that there's not a lot of depth in terms of there being a ton of great non-con games.
Yeah, and I'm not
Yeah,
throwing in Indiana
Michigan's
at Cincinnati.
Yeah, Michigan State going to Washington could be interesting depending on what Washington is this year. Jimmy Lake is gone, so I mean that could be an interesting game because you get two kind of what is the next year of Mel Tucker going to look like at Michigan State? You got that kind of open question, and what's the what is that Washington team going to look like this under a new coach this year? That's a little bit interesting to me.
In Wisconsin playing Washington State in week 2. Who knows what's going on at Washington State by that point? But a different matchup, of course. Maybe a game day matchup, and we'll see some Washington State flags there for that one. Anything in this queue that we need to
I was going to say I've
address?
got the first one already queued up with JG asking why are they moving the schedule around this late? Because I think that's a very valid question.
Yeah, and that was due to some games lost last year for COVID. Just fixing some things. I didn't, I don't. Did we know they were going to do this until like the last couple of days when it started? Like I had no idea this was coming. I figured last year was just a wash, and it's like, well, it's unfortunate for everybody. And then when I saw yesterday that this is coming, my immediate thought was doubleheader with Michigan. Get that game back from last year. Get try to just get those two teams back on the field as often as possible to make up for last year. And it could be a day night doubleheader. You could open the season with them, close the season with them. It doesn't matter. And you know what? One of them doesn't even have to be a conference game. Like the 12 p.m. kick, yes, conference game. The 4:30 kick, not non-conference. Something like that.
That's a lot of football there. How about Thursday, Saturday? How about you do like
Okay.
Thursday, rest on Friday, and then you go again on Thursday.
Are they going to want to compete against the NFL though on Thursday? Probably not. Friday, Saturday. That would be better. Yeah, so that was really why, just fixing some stuff, and there were a couple of games added. I paused the Big Ten Network here. Like Illinois at Indiana was added. Northwestern at Penn State was added. Congratulations, Northwestern, on getting that added to your schedule on October 1st. That was the original date for the Ohio State game, if I recall. And and then I guess some locations changed. Michigan at Indiana changed. Was that going to be at Michigan next year? I'm not sure. But Nebraska at Purdue was a location change. Purdue at Wisconsin was a location change. Michigan State at Michigan was a location change. I don't understand any of this as I'm reading it because it's muted and I can't hear what they're saying. But that's why, just fixing stuff from last year, making up for some stuff, and probably like listening to complaints from administrators at those schools and trying to appease them a little bit. But it is, yeah, I don't know. I was gonna say it is kind of late, but it is also just January. There's plenty of time. As we've seen, they can put a schedule together in a matter of weeks, in terms of weeks before the season, like they did in 2020, and get it done.
Yeah, and frankly, this is a much more, like, it would make a lot more sense to do this every year and be able to create some more interesting matchups. You don't have to schedule these things 4 years out, 5 years out, the way they sometimes do, because it's like, well, we'd like to be able to know, we'd like to be able to plan. It's like you can put together, you're going to have 5 home dates this year and 4 home dates that year, and then you can release it the year of and actually set up where you don't have 4 of, because you can sort of figure out like, hey, this is going to be a year when Michigan State might be pretty good, or Michigan State might be pretty bad, or Rutgers might be on the upswing, or Indiana might be on the downswing. And you can kind of set up weeks where you have at least one kind of interesting game every week. And you don't have the week where you're just kind of stuck with just garbage matchups across the conference, where it's like, why is Ohio State and Maryland the big noon kickoff game? It's like, well, did you see the rest of the schedule? You don't have to do this stuff further in advance, and they'd be better served to do it this way all the time. One question I had though was, did you say that Michigan State was moved? Because Michigan played at Michigan State last year, so they should have been playing in Ann Arbor this year anyway, right? Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
I don't that no, yeah, they played in at Michigan State last year, and so I didn't. That's why I was reading that, and I don't understand that. I don't know if this was was going to be one of those years where they're back to back, where they play at the same place 2 years in a row to make up for something else. But yeah, so I'm reading that, and I don't understand it either, because
They'd like to have Michigan. Michigan likes to have either Michigan State or Ohio State at home in any given year. I mean, I think the Big Ten tries to do that, where it's, Ohio State goes to Penn State in a year that they host Michigan, and then they have Penn State at home in a year that they go to Michigan. That way, you're in a world where season tickets still matter, then you're at least giving people. You don't have the year where it's just like, Purdue is the best home game, like, because they don't want to stick teams with completely garbage home schedules in any season.
Because now I am looking at FBSschedules.com, and it does have Michigan at Michigan State in 2022. That was the original schedule.
That's weird.
So maybe it was one of those years where they were making it. So it was going to be at Michigan State 2 years in a row. I'm sure Michigan fans could tell us more about that, because now didn't Ohio State and Penn State do that? Like Penn State played at Ohio State 2 years in a row.
No, Ohio State played at Penn State. Ohio State played at Penn State 2 years in a row, 94 and 95, right when Penn State came into the league. I remember that. Did they play 2 home games in a row?
I'm pulling that. I'm trying to pull that up right now as we're going through this.
I think they did, because I seem to recall some Penn State fans complaining, but it could
what
it could have been about anything.
Ohio, so. It was 10 and 11. There were back-to-backs in Columbus.
Okay,
well,
so
no one had anything else to complain about those 2 programs in 2011. So,
Tom, they sure did not. Well, that'll do it for the show today. Yeah, so that it does look like so that makes sense, I guess, then, to change that. Yeah, and again, I think what you're saying, Tom, like that whole Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State, when you've got the two best teams and you're playing them on the road, it's always a little frustrating for whichever team is getting that, and maybe they're trying to maneuver that for Michigan, and now they had to unmaneuver it or perhaps remaneuver it. I don't know if that's going to be fixed in the future or if it's just it is what it is at this point. You're going to have to deal with it. So that's why the changes. Any questions in the queue as I
Yeah,
scroll through here?
I'll start. I'll just keep putting them up, and as we address one, I'll throw the next one. Trenton asking, are there any trap games in our opinion?
Trap games. I mean, they're set out pretty well in advance. I mean, Notre Dame is not a trap game. Wisconsin isn't. At Michigan State, I don't think that's a trap game because you're aware of them.
And it's
At
their it's
Northwestern,
their
I
first
mean,
road game, so yeah, that's going to be a pretty
I mean,
obvious
I'm going
one.
to put Iowa, and I don't like home trap games. I don't
right.
believe in home trap
Yeah.
games. Coming off the open week, having Penn State on the back end of it, having the big bad boogeyman at the end of the year with Booger Man, Jim Harbaugh, on the at the end of that. I think that Iowa kind of shapes up to be my trap game in terms of what they have there. I know that, again, it flies in the face of what a lot of times a trap game is, awareness. But I just think with kind of some of the other things that are on there, you're coming out of that open week, hopefully undefeated if you're an Ohio State fan, feeling, fat and happy. That just seems to be the one, even though we know Iowa is much more dangerous at Kinnick than it is on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that to me, if that was at Iowa, that would be the big flashing red light to me. But yeah, I think, and I will confess, I have not yet done a particularly deep dive on 2022 Northwestern or Maryland. But if you tell me which of those teams is better, I will tell you which of those is a trap game, because either one of them is a road game. Northwestern was 3-9 last year, so that I sort of assume that, well, of course they'll be better because that's how they do. They are. They are up and they are down and they are up and they are down. So if they were down last year, they must be due for a better season this year. Back-to-back road games, the week before being the whiteout at Penn State. We have seen Ohio State fall flat on its butt the week after a big win over Penn State. So that's a possibility. The Maryland game, if Maryland is a 7-5 type team again this year, the week before Michigan, it's a road game. Again, we have sort of seen Ohio State go on the road the week before the Michigan game and just play an absolute tire fire of a game down in Maryland. That was the last time Ohio State was down there because the 2020 game got canceled because of COVID stuff within the Maryland program. So, yeah, I think if you're going to pick one, it's one of those two, but I don't know enough about those two teams just yet to be able to tell you which one I think it is.
Well, Tom, let me change your mind here. And I think we're going to end up agreeing with Kevin. Because
Probably.
when you look at who Northwestern plays before they play Ohio State, they are at Iowa. And then they play Ohio State. So they might be a little banged up. You look at who Maryland plays before they play Ohio State, and they are at Wisconsin and at Penn State. You look at who Iowa plays before they play Ohio State, they have a bye week, and that's a week after they're at Illinois. So they're going to have a week off before Ohio State, and I'm looking to see anybody else have any weeks off before playing Ohio State as I scan through here very quickly. And so far it is just Iowa, and that is
that's it. Yep.
So
yeah, and boy, you want to talk about teams with some brutally difficult stretches. The final 6 games of Northwestern season. Well, sorry, let's go through the final 8 game of Northwestern season.
Oh, geez.
At Penn State, home for Wisconsin, bye week. At Maryland, at Iowa, Ohio State, at Minnesota, at Purdue, in Illinois. They have 2 back-to-back road weeks in the span of 5 games. 5 weeks. They have 2 back-to-back road games.
And who's
But
their
the home
home
game?
game? Ohio State.
On the road in 5 weeks. Goodness.
But then they do get to play Illinois for the no longer awarded Sweet Sue Tomahawk because that's bad. I mean, they renamed the Governor Land Lincoln Trophy, some crap like that.
It's Abraham Lincoln's hat, sir.
It's
First
not
of
the
all,
Sweet
how
Sue
dare you?
Tomahawk, which was much cooler.
First of all, how dare you?
How many times has Sweet Sue been president?
Mm.
Who is she?
Where
Anyway,
where is Sue?
I think
Speaking
she
of Sue,
she
where
sings
is
for
Sue?
Susie and the Banshees.
speaking of bye weeks, before the Michigan has both Michigan State and Penn State get bye weeks before they play at Michigan.
Oh boy.
I'm guessing Michigan fans are not going to be happy about that one. And I'm sure Jim Harbaugh probably isn't either. So it's like, okay, you'll get these two games at home, but we're going to give them bye weeks before they play you. That's pretty interesting.
The
Penn
Big Ten
State,
is just, the Big
Indiana
Ten
gets
is just looking out for its membership. The Big Ten's just looking out for its membership. They just want to protect Michigan so they don't get massacred in the playoff again. You're welcome.
No, when we start seeing Big Ten teams scheduling the Citadel and some of these, who else? Who are some of the other SEC chicken blank week teams that they
Wofford.
Wofford? Yes. Once we see that happening, then
Florida State.
I was going to say Jacksonville
night,
State.
folks.
You actually beat
Good
Florida
night.
State, so your joke is better.
Yeah, I'm just looking for like any of these random non-conference games during this, like during the middle of the season. I don't really see any. It looks like they're all done by like week 4, which is, I guess, good.
Yeah. While we're looking at that, RK asking any word on realignment for the conference?
No, nothing. No, and there's all kinds of talks going on about the playoff stuff like that. I don't know if any of the realignment talk is going on there. It sounds like there have been no positive talks about anything. So I guess college football is just going to be what it is until they decide, you know what, let's actually just do something. And they're like, okay, we should have decided that long ago. Like Jim Delaney, nothing is going to change. Nothing is changing. It's going to status quo until it's like, oh, I was for playoffs all along. I have long said that we need playoffs, and finally, after battling popular opinion, I now have the playoffs. And so it's a lot of dragging the feet, holding out for the best option, and then I guess, I don't know, deciding, you know what, let's just not do anything. Or like, but again, what else is out there right now? And that's the other sticking point with the TV contracts and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You've got the Big Ten TV contract coming up in 2023, I believe.
4,
So
I think.
Is it 4? But I mean, you're gonna have to have it
I
decided.
mean, yeah,
It's going to be decided.
we're in the very front end of renegotiations. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about CBS getting involved there in terms of becoming a partner and taking ABC, ESPN out and having it being a CBS Fox, which would mean BTN as well, type of deal. So yeah, we're on the front end of that.
Yeah, I think the Big Ten contract expires in 23, I believe, or after the 23 season. So, yeah, that's coming. You've got the college football playoff expansion, which is coming, which, I mean, those are going to be two pretty big sea changes in the sport. And I think you're going to see whatever changes you're going to see surrounding those decisions quite possibly before the TV deal would make sense. I mean, you get that you get that in and you get that priced into your next TV deal. That I think would make a lot of sense. So yeah, I think you're going to see something in the next, I would guess 12 months, 6 to 12 months, you're going to see something there. When did the Texas Oklahoma stuff break? That was kind of like what? Like, did that break when we were at Big Ten?
We were on
Media
the
Days?
road
It broke in
somewhere.
July, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that broke in July. Like that's kind of when this stuff kind of tends to break, is kind of summer-ish time. And you get it done. So yeah, I would say 6 to 12 months. You're probably going to have whatever movement you're going to have then, because you want to have that baked into your next TV deal.
Well, and additionally, ACC is locked into its grant of rights until 3059 or something ridiculous of where that one's
2035 or 2036, one of those.
Something like that. It may as well be 3059. We still won't have flying cars at that point. But the issue is then other leagues need to cannibalize the ACC to a point that there's nobody left to be able to collect the penalty money for there. I mean, who are you really looking at? Are you looking at remnants of the Big 12 as the Big 12 tries to rebuild around Cincinnati and some of these other teams? I don't want Kansas. I don't care. I mean, they don't add anything except for basketball, and if I've learned anything in all these years in this industry, nobody reads basketball stories. And I just don't think that the addition of just basketball is going to really matter that much. It's not going to turn on any television sets. I mean, I think that the reason why Texas is leaving the Big 12 is to get away from Kansas. After the results here recently of Texas not even being able to beat lowly KU. I don't know what's there. I mean, everybody still wants to, Notre Dame, Notre Dame, Notre Dame. You need to poop or get off the pot with Notre Dame. You're either all in and you bring them in, or you tell all your conference members, stop scheduling them. Stop scheduling them, as Ohio State has a 2-game series with Notre Dame starting. Why would you give Notre Dame a recruiting foothold within the area by playing them? If you want to go be an ACC school, go be an ACC school. But we're not gonna have any team within your footprint play you. So good luck with that. But nobody really wants to play hardball in these types of situations, and it's also congenial and cordial and everything else. It's just a big crock is what it is. I love covering realignment, but I get so sick of the politics too.
That's why I applaud Michigan for dropping Notre Dame from their non-conference and going to a more lenient non-conference of Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn this year. And next year's is also just as bad. They canceled a UCLA series for this year and next year, which, I mean, you're playing UCLA. That's going to make your schedule way
They don't
better.
want to play in the Rose Bowl. Come on, man.
Yeah. But I asked Michigan fans on Twitter, like, aren't you like upset about this? Your non-conference schedule, your non-conference ticket next year is terrible. And they're like, no, love it, because then we're not going to lose any of those games. You can only afford one loss to make the playoffs. And it's like, whoa. You get one taste of the playoffs and you think this is your birthright now. Relax. But I just think that ticket is horrendous. And I'm just dreading writing Michigan Monday after those first 3 games where it's.
You should just start writing it now.
I may just like copy and paste each one for each week, because you can't. There's nothing to be gleaned from that, and even the Maryland game at that point, which is their 4th game, like that's just a really boring way to go about it. But Michigan fans are fine with it because it's a sure win, and I guess after struggling so much, you got to take the sure wins when they're there for you, I guess.
Well, you look at their next 2 non-conference schedules, 2022 and 2023. The best team on either of those schedules out of the non-conference games is probably East Carolina. Probably. Like you think I'm kidding, and it's Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn, which are 3 teams that are probably going to have new coaches, or at least 2 of them do have new coaches, and the 3rd one should. And then next year it's East Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. Like,
I remember a lightly thought of team from North Carolina that went into Michigan and won, Appalachian State, but that was.
Oh, okay. Oh, I was like, I wonder who he might be talking about. And
yes,
I can remember
Appalachian State of Boone, North Carolina.
I can remember another lightly thought of team from Northwest Ohio going into Michigan Stadium and winning as well about a year later. And they do have Texas on their non-conference schedule. They're at DKR in 2024, and then at Oklahoma in 2025. So I mean, they have some teams coming up. Oklahoma at home in 2026, and so boy, a lot of SEC's teams all of a sudden. Texas at home in 2027. But yeah, I mean, the next 2 years, like those are. Do you remember it was 2007 where Ohio State played
Youngstown State,
Akron, and Washington, when they had scheduled a Washington team that was good, and they got a Washington team that was very much not good. Mm-hmm. That was the 2007 schedule where the helmet schedule spelled yawn at the start, because it was Youngstown State, Akron, Washington, and Northwestern, and it was like, yep, that is exactly what that start this season is. That's Michigan's schedule this year. Yawn.
Speaking of Michigan, King Bronco says he's going to come to Scoop Eats in Evanston. So, King Bronco, if you set it up, you come there, I'll even buy you your hot dog. Just one, no toppings, especially ketchup.
Why you got to throw a shot at me in there?
Because that's what I do.
Hi, Tony. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly podcast. You must be new here.
Fine. Now I'm looking through the team by team Big Ten schedule to see if there are any words spelled, but you know, I don't see any, unfortunately. But that's all right. I'll take a closer look later on and see if there's something there. Where goes one? My bold prediction for 22 is the Ohio State Buckeyes will go undefeated. And you look at the schedule, and certainly the regular season schedule, I don't see them being an underdog anywhere. And I'm seeing a touchdown favorite everywhere. I think there'll be a touchdown favorite or more against at Penn State, and probably conservatively like 7 or 8 points against Notre Dame, even though it should probably be more. But yeah, they should certainly win all of their regular season games, and then of course whoever they're going to face in the Big Ten championship game. So they should be significant favorites until the playoffs.
Yeah, and that's you could basically say that every year.
Mhm.
Until Georgia or Alabama is on the non-conference schedule, you could basically say that every year. You could have said that this year, and then the games start. So I
But
will
you
I
can't
will
use
remind,
facts and experiences to project, Tom.
I will say it is way too early to start getting into projecting teams and records and all that kind of stuff, because it's you look at the stuff that you have to figure out on the Ohio State side of things right now. Like, what is the Jim Knowles defense going to look like? How quickly are players going to pick it up? Are they done making coaching changes on the defensive side of the ball? Because it feels like they might not be. There's so many variables there. Like coming out of spring ball, I might have some sense for how I feel about this schedule, but until then, I would say, yes, they will be favored by at least a touchdown in every single game this year. But I will remind everyone, like, what is the number one rule of predicting college football seasons? Like, there is so much variability. You are, even if you're 75% likely to win every single game on your schedule, like, odds are you're going to lose at least one of them, and quite possibly two of them. That's just how probability works. And how many undefeated regular seasons has Ohio State had in the last 50 years? I'm asking. I mean, 2002 they were,
2012,
2006 they were, 2012 they were.
13.
I'm 1979 they were, but I mean, it's like you can go back 40 years, and I think the answer is three. I think it's 2019 they were, so 2019, 12
Did you say regular season?
regular season. Yes, regular season.
13
Yeah,
as well.
13. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think we're counting the Big Ten championship game. It's like, but you go through. It's like there's only like a handful in the last 40 years, and odds are you're gonna, if you give me $1 every time they go undefeated in the regular season, and I give you $1 every time they lose a game, guess what? I'm ending up with more money than you are. So on the whole, especially, you've got games like going to Penn State, as Trenton says. PSU Halloween weekend will be tough. Imagine a whiteout. I mean, we don't have to imagine it. We've been there for those a whole bunch, especially on Halloween weekend. That is a tough game. That is a game where, even if you're a much better team, you're 65-35 to beat, Penn State. And, Bowl 58. How often has Ohio State go to Penn State and wondering a whiteout? Like, yeah,
A lot.
they have.
Ohio State has a
That's what they've also
fantastic
done.
record at the whiteout.
Yes, but
Penn
they've
State's
also
record
lost those
overall
games.
at whiteout is like 500. I mean,
Yeah, that's because it's always the best game on their schedule. So, like, Ohio State lost there in the whiteout in 2005. Ohio State lost there in the whiteout in 2016, and they've had some. I mean, the 2018 game was very close, and they could have lost that one. You're getting into some toss-up games. So, yeah, I
have the list in front of me of whiteout of the 17 games that have been considered whiteouts. Penn State is 9-8, with Auburn 21 being considered a whiteout game. There was no whiteout in 20 because there were no fans in the stands. But Ohio State lost in 18. Ohio State won in 16. Ohio State lost in 14. Ohio State, now I'm going back, jumping there, won in 2005, lost in 12. But, the thing is, for this being this impossible atmosphere, and it's incredible. And Tom gets to experience it even more than Tony and I do, because Tom's on the field taking pictures. We're in the rickety old crappy press box that's going to fall apart at any given moment. Tom's out there and gets to see and hear everything. It's one of the best fan experiences out there, unless you're an Ohio State fan. But for what it is, people make it sound like that out of 17 games that Penn State should be 14-3, but Tom hit the nail right on the head. It's the best game of their schedule. So, I mean, when you sit there and you look at every whiteout game from 11 on has been against a top 25 team, and no opponent has been ranked lower than 22, which was Auburn. I mean, it's a coin flip.
I think it's going to be a big noon kickoff.
That would be so funny. That would be so funny if they had a whiteout at noon.
And here's a question for you guys, you two TV people. Every year we know Ohio State Michigan week is the first week that is drafted.
Mm-hmm.
So is Ohio State Notre Dame week going to be the second week that is drafted? And then is that an ESPN night game?
Fox gets first two, is my understanding.
First two? Wow.
It's my understanding of the deal.
Did that change it?
No, it's been because Fox put more money into the deal. I heard that Fox get the first 2 weeks, is the way I've heard the deal.
Unless it's changed, I believe I had Matt Sars on the podcast a month or two ago, and his understanding was it was just the first one. But I mean, either way, like I think there's a decent possibility that is the second game picked. It's either going to be the Ohio State Notre Dame game, which you get, I mean, as much as people roll their eyes at Notre Dame does draw a national audience in the same way that Ohio State draws. Like that'll be probably, if that's a primetime game, that will be, one of the top 5 most watched regular season games of the year, the Ohio State Notre Dame game. The Ohio State at Penn State game, that'll be another one. Like those are going to be the top 3 weeks, and those are going to be the top 3 games of those weeks in the whole Big Ten schedule. And it's just kind of a question of, without looking at, who else is playing the weekend of October 29th? Is there a massive SEC game the weekend of October 29th, or is Alabama playing someone week 1 in one of those neutral site games this year or whatever? I mean, without looking at some of the other context, it's hard to know, but that, those will be one of those will be on ABC and one of those will be on Fox. Again, regardless, whether Fox has the top 2 picks or ABC has the second pick, those are going, one of those is going to be on Fox, one of those is going to be on ABC. I
mean, you have to jump on that Notre Dame game when you can, because you only get one bite at the apple there, because the other game is always going to be on NBC. So
and the other concern is that, assuming baseball actually does come back from a lockout, that Saturday of October 29th is almost certainly going to be a World Series Saturday. So there'd be a night game on Fox. So if ABC, let's just say ABC has the second pick and picks the Fox Ohio State or the Notre Dame Ohio State game, then Fox as the third pick would get the Ohio State Penn State game. But because they have it on, would have a World Series game that day, then it would be potentially like a noon game that day, or could, I guess, theoretically be a 3:30 game. But there's a lot of those kind of considerations that go into it when they're putting together that TV schedule. So yeah, it's too soon to make a real definitive declaration on which one's going to be on which network and when. But that's some of the stuff that will end up going into that decision.
Oh, I thought I had my next question up. Hold on. RK asking, are there any whispers about Mayan Williams? Hope he stays a Buckeye. He's not somebody I've really heard a whole lot about as I sit back up. It wouldn't surprise me to see the room shuffle a little bit more. I thought it might shuffle more when I thought Chip Trayanum was coming in as a running back as opposed to a linebacker. But now that he's a linebacker, I mean, Trevion Henderson is going to be your main guy. Master Teague is already off to the NFL. We know that. Then, you have this group that includes, Mayan Williams, Marcus Crowley, Evan Pryor. You've got Dallin Hayden coming in. I wouldn't be surprised to potentially see a running back head to the portal. I've heard a couple of guys' names mentioned as potential transfer candidates, but I don't know. Have you guys heard anything about Mayan in particular?
No, and we've talked about this like a week or two ago about Mayan Williams, and that we don't really put people in the portal, but you as a running back, a talented running back like Mayan Williams, how happy is he getting the carries that he got at the end of the season? And I don't know that you could be happy. And so he's probably a guy that views himself as a starter because, hey, he started the season as Ohio State's starter. So why? Well, certainly he believes he's good enough. And so I'm like, if he were to transfer, it would not shock me. I am not saying he's going to or anything like that. I just know as a starter, when you are no longer a starter, one of the options you have is to transfer. And if your snaps get cut by as many as his did, this is part of the formula. Like these are the characteristics of players who transfer. But if he sticks around, I obviously you would like to see him stick around because him and Travion Henderson are different types of backs who can complement each other really well, I think. But that's another part of projecting the top 25s. Even the poor people who have to write the magazines, they put them out, and the rosters still aren't set in June when these things in July when they hit the press. Like there's still roster movement, which is insane.
Yeah. So, I mean, before I jump to the next question on there, I mean, I think that we saw Travion Henderson not having a year of football as a senior in high school. We saw him hit a bit of a wall. So, of course, there's going to be the question of, did they overwork Travion Henderson last year? But then again, everybody was upset that he was only getting 9 to 13 carries during so much of the early season, during the yawn period that we saw from post Oregon until they got to like a real game. I don't know. I mean, it would really benefit them if Mayan comes back, but you just don't know. I mean, he's good enough to be a starter at how many of the other 13 Big Ten schools? I mean, a good number of them. Good number
12.
of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other question is, if you're a running back, do you want to be a 25 or 30 carry a game guy? Like, I'm sure as a competitor you do, but as a practical matter, like if you can be a 10 to 15 carry guy at the college level, then you go into the NFL with a lot more tread left on your tires. So, if you're willing to split carries at the college level, that could actually be beneficial to you long term. And it's not, if Master Teague has said he's leaving, so with and Steel Chambers is in the linebacker room right now, and Marcus Crowley is coming back from an injury, so we don't know what they've got with him. And Evan Pryor, I think they're high on Evan Pryor, but he's got to spend another year with Coach Mick getting bulked up, and kind of we'll see what he looks like this spring. But if you are Mayan Williams, the carries are going to be there as the number 2 guy. Like, you are going to be the number 2 guy unless something really shocking happens and you get passed. And if you get passed, you get passed. But if you're the number 2 guy, you are one injury away from being the number 1 guy, and you're also going to get carries pretty much every game. So, we'll see. And there's we'll see how the change of the addition of Justin Fry maybe changes some of the offensive line schemes or thoughts. I'm going to have Ross Fulton on the morning show for tomorrow is Thursday. I'll have Ross Fulton on the morning show for Thursday to talk about that and kind of get his thoughts on how that might impact the running game. But, I think it's definitely not any kind of a sure thing that Mayan Williams leaves. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that he stays and has a lot of opportunity to, make the most of whatever carries he gets.
Jumping to Mindy's question, do you think that Ohio State has a shot at Kristen Miller? I had the opportunity to talk to him down in San Antonio. He did not participate in the game. He had a leg brace on his right leg. He said that he'd be fine. He'd be moving to a smaller brace this next week and get back to lifting. Nobody likes recruiting as much as Kristen Miller. He loves Kristen Miller. I asked Kojo Antwi, another player out of the state of Georgia, about it. I was like, do you think he enjoys it too much? He's like, oh yeah, definitely. And then I asked Miller if, how he was going to do his commitment ceremony, if he was going to jump out of a plane or something, which of course Tony ran with us, like, yeah, and it should be a parachute of the school that he's picking. And I think that would be fantastic. I think that there might be some risk management issues with that. I mean, but then again, he's not signed anywhere, so no program can say, don't do that. But yeah, I think they got a shot at him. But, is he playing the bluff game? And I'm going to throw this to Tony because Tony is the master of hat science. So and that's all about, you think about bluffing there. Is he bluffing by putting out all this Ohio State stuff, retweeting these memes, wearing Ohio State shorts on Tuesday at practice? or is it a double bluff? Does he assume people think he's bluffing, but he really is intending on going to Ohio State? So it's kind of like the double negative. So it all cancels itself out by broadcasting where you're going. You assume you're throwing the head fake, but you really aren't. I mean, so I don't know, Tony. How would that all work in hat science?
Well, really, and I could go on and on. It just depends on who puts the hats, who actually sets up the hats. That's one question. Does the person who sets up the hats know which hat is going to be chosen? That's another question. But with all of this double bluffs, it's like, what is 0 times negative 0? Nobody knows. Nobody knows that answer. But he is a game player. I do think, honestly, jumping out of a plane and having the parachute with the school logo open up would just be the absolute best. I know people like the live animal reveals, like, oh, you got a bulldog puppy, he's going to Georgia. If you want to I do not recommend bringing a live animal to the parachute jump, because you really got to hold on, because there's going to be a jerk when that parachute goes, and you really don't want to make a mark by making a mark, I guess, as that poor bulldog puppy falls 3,000 feet to the ground. But that's not why we're here. But
Enough
yes,
about the SEC championship game.
I do think he is playing a game. I don't expect him to be a Buckeye, just because that's not how these things usually work. And the guys who really, really enjoy it, it's fun because you can get the interviews, and you had a great interview with him. He's a really charismatic kid, and but it seems like he enjoys those a lot, and will say what he wants them to hear, what maybe they want to hear. And then the entire time he's talking with his family about, when is moving day at Georgia, or wherever he's going to end up, Texas A&M, the boogeyman in the room.
Super chat from Yakov. Yeah, Tony, sorry for upsetting you earlier. Worded it poorly. I don't even know what this is about, but I can tell you, Yakov, whatever it was you had coming, you have nothing to apologize for.
Please speculate on what I got upset about, Tom. I would love to hear it.
Probably me calling you out about ketchup. I don't
know. But Yakov 22 was he's on with us on the Mark Rogers show, and he said something roughly like, Ohio State should not listen to compliance regarding the NIL stuff. So I went off on that, and he's like, I was, just kind of kidding. But again, it wasn't just directed to him. There are a lot of Ohio State fans saying Ohio State should ignore compliance, and that's really what I was going off on. And then Tom, you should have seen Noon. He's like, Doug Archie is the worst human that has ever existed. And
no, I called you Tony Archie because you were right there on his knee. You're right there on his knee. I mean, I think, are you up for a job in compliance?
If they'll have me.
I burned through another question to get to Yakov's super chat, and it was somebody asking if Jim Knowles was working with the linebackers.
It sounds like, that's his background. His background is working with linebackers. So the 2022 Ohio State defensive coaching staff is not entirely set in stone yet. So we'll see where it ends up. But it sounds like Knowles working with the linebackers is at least at least in some form is going to happen. Is he solely responsible for the linebackers? We don't know that yet. And if he is solely responsible for the linebackers, does that mean Al Washington is somewhere else? Or does that mean Al Washington is just working with a different position group? That's kind of one of the other questions that we're sort of waiting for an official resolution on, because we have a group text among staff, and it's like, here's what I'm hearing right now. Here's what I'm hearing right now. And, the answers keep changing in a way that I really am wondering, like, it feels like normally we have this stuff kind of nailed down. And it's like right now, it seems like no one has a final answer either on our staff or kind of anywhere else. It really feels like I don't know that anyone knows the actual final answer just yet.
As for, the Washington, I mean, if he does stay and Jim Knowles does work with the linebackers, I mean, the assumption would be that he'd slide down to work with the line. But what does that mean for Larry Johnson? Do they both work there? I mean, it's a lot of questions. And I mean, I've seen in the chat questions about, well, what does it mean about this coach? And what does it mean about that coach? And yeah, what Tom said is right. I mean, things keep seeming to evolve a little bit. I'm not going to kind of get into everything we have there because it's not stuff that we have nailed down. I think we're getting a clearer picture of what's going to happen. I don't think we've seen the last coaching change for Ohio State with the Justin Fry news, but there's going to be a little bit of a wait and see. And we've been asked as well, have we heard about a press conference with Knowles, and I guess by extension Fry? I think they're probably going to wait until the dust settles, and I think it might go all the way to National Signing Day, first week of February, and it'll kind of be a joint press conference. Here we are talking about Hero Canoe, Carson Hinsman, maybe Kristen Miller, and oh, by the way, here are our new coaches. Thanks. See you in April.
It is. It's one of the. It's a couple hours of just football overload from coaches and players, and when do you talk to the early enrollees as well? I mean, so there's all kinds of stuff going on. But yeah, I'm with Kevin. I expect all of that to be the signing day. Tom, what are you laughing about?
In the past, we've talked about that day being the day the SID office says to us, "Oh, you want football interviews, do you? Okay, well,
Yeah.
how about you smoke the whole pack?" And it's just like, "Oh, well, you didn't get any interviews in January, but boom, you're going to get talk to every human being in this building on one day." And you know what? When we have a chance to do that, we are truly grateful because it is tremendous content. It's a lot of stuff for us to write about and talk about and think about for the next month or so during what is normally a quiet period. But yeah, it is generally a day full of football in your face.
Very much so.
JG feels that 2022 will be a national championship on the 100-year anniversary of Ohio Stadium, affectionately known as the Shoe.
Yeah, we've had some people asking us to do a show about that in terms of like a deep dive on the history of Ohio Stadium, a hardcore history, Tom, if you will, on Ohio Stadium. I don't know if we need to make it 22 hours or whatever.
If we get Jack Park, he could just talk for 22 hours.
There, you certainly could do that, but
let me just be the first to say, dibs. All right, so
yeah, no, I agree. I think it's an interesting idea, and again, anytime you guys have any ideas for shows, feel free to let us know, because there are a lot of days on a calendar year where we do not have shows planned, and there may not be anything to talk about. So if you can fill those days out for us, all the better. Ooh, Mindy Van Sickle. My bold prediction, Jackson Smith and Jigba wins the Heisman. And to win the Heisman for a wide receiver, you've got to do something like he did the last half of the season, last 5 games of the season, where it's just so much beyond what anybody else is doing that this is clearly the best player in the nation. And you also have to outshine your quarterback, which is really hard because he's the one giving you the ball. So not only do you have to outshine by far everybody else so that you are no longer normal what you're doing, you also have to somehow take the credit away from CJ Stroud in doing this. So this is probably one of those things where, I don't know, Tom, maybe you run routes a little worse so the throws look like they're off, and then you have to, oh, gosh, hit me in the numbers, stuff like that. Make it seem really difficult.
I'm glad that's what you guys do on the podcast. You guys just ham and egg it so I look better on the podcast.
This you think this is better? Wow. Whew, okay. I think the interesting thought here is you're getting into sort of the game theory of Heisman voters and like what do Heisman voters go for, because they almost never vote for. I think Devontae Smith was the first wide receiver to win it since
Tim Brown.
Like Tim Brown or Desmond Howard.
Howard.
Yeah, Desmond. But that's generally like punt returns. Like that's generally like Devontae Smith had punt return touchdowns. Desmond Howard, Tim Brown, they had punt return touchdowns. You're not generally going to win it just as a wide receiver. However, the other side of that is if you ask anyone who's Ohio State's most likely Heisman candidate next year, everyone will say CJ Stroud because it's a quarterback award by and large. The problem is you get into the Heisman voting base, which I swear is not the sharpest knife in the college football drawer on the whole. I know Heisman voters, and I like Heisman voters on an individual basis, but it's like they, as a voting block, like it is not always a group that does actually what it's supposed to be doing, which is picking the most outstanding player. For example, this year they picked the teammate of the most outstanding player, which was so close. Almost, guys. You almost got it. But the correct answer was Will Anderson. Good job. But that much. But when you look at quarterbacks who have, come close one year, Stroud being 4th place finalist this year, Trevor Lawrence, I think, was a finalist one year, and then it's like, well, certainly he will be the front runner next year. And he had another very good year, and it's like, well, but we're bored with him now. What's new and shiny? And I mean, as we all know, nothing is shinier than Trevor Lawrence because of the flowing golden hair, but somehow that wasn't good enough. I wonder if CJ Stroud is going to be in the I'm tired of playing with this toy. I want a new toy. And if he kind of falls into that bucket, and through no fault of his own, he could put together monster numbers and still kind of fall into that bucket a little bit. And, if that's the case, and Jackson Smith-Njigba is one of the reasons why he's falling into that bucket, and maybe he does something on special teams as well. You want to return a punt for a touchdown against Michigan, like that will significantly impact your chances of winning the Heisman, with the exact same numbers that you have, in the receiving game. So that's sort of the stuff that I kind of wonder about. And then, does TreVeyon Henderson blow up? Like if TreVeyon Henderson has a massive sophomore season and puts up J.K. Dobbins numbers, 2,000 yards and 18, 20 touchdowns, whatever Dobbins had, like, maybe he's the guy who ends up being, the new and shiny thing that Heisman voters get attracted to. But, and you kind of have to remember the Heisman voting base on the whole is, they're like ravens. Like they're just as a flock, it's like, oh, shiny thing. And they all just sort of swoop down and go after that.
Ravens are really smart, though.
Well,
not the ones from Baltimore.
True. And if you guys are watching on YouTube right now, go ahead and hit the like button and all of that stuff to let the algorithms know people are actually watching. Other than the fact that they know people are watching, but it gets to more people. Amari, what about the tight end Jaleel Billingsley transfer from Alabama? This is a guy Ohio State was in on in recruiting early on, and I think he was one of the finalists. Has had 2 pretty good years at Alabama, but has been a frustrating aspect of been frustrating for Nick Saban. It seems at times where he's not quite the player they want him to be, and there's been some issues just with I don't know if it's work ethic or whatever, but he's an undersized tight end, and Ohio State already has those. And yeah, he's been a productive player, but it's if he's not fitting in at Alabama, similar to the Eli Ricks thing, like if these are guys who aren't good for the cultures they're leaving, what makes you think they're going to be good for the cultures they're entering? And even though Ohio State could use a tight end, you wonder if this is a guy that isn't even on their board or gets taken off their board pretty quickly after doing some research.
Yeah, the thing is that he's had the 2 years. The numbers have been similar, but year 1 was considered a really good year, and this last year was considered to be, it was a horrible year, and you go and look at the numbers. But I'll take this from Billingsley's side of it. If I'm a tight end who's really just a big wide receiver, which Billingsley is, do I want to go into the Ohio State offense? Oh, yes, they throw the ball all around. Well, all around except the tight end. So I don't know if that's what I want to do. If my goal is to go to the league, I don't know if Ohio State is necessarily the right fit. I do believe that Ohio State needs to look into the portal with the loss of Jeremy Ruckert. And that's not taking anything away from Joe Royer, Sam Hart. You don't have Stover there anymore. Incoming Bennett Christian. But, they don't necessarily have the dude there right now. So I think you need to get somebody in there. But I think it's going to be somebody who's going to be much more in that Rucker, Jeff Hireman, Nick Vanette type of thing. And they're not going to go out and get this guy that's this huge offensive weapon, because you're going to take. Are you not going to throw it to Jackson Smith-Njigba and to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Julian Fleming and Emeka Egbuka, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
No, I'm with you. Let's see. We have gone now an hour and 15 almost. How long do you guys want to keep doing this? I know we got a bunch of people watching.
Let's shoot for 1:30 Eastern. Another 15 minutes or so. We just cracked over 300 people watching us. Thank you everybody who's watching us. We've been kind of in the 2s, so it seems that more and more people are finding us as they get back from lunch.
Yes, it was just 2 people watching. That's the 2s we were in. Speaking of 2s.
Speaking of lunch, Yakov, perhaps during the off season, you guys can go out weekly to local restaurants and review your meal, either live or recorded. I find it quite interesting. Oh, Yakov, you won't believe it. We have a segment called Scoop Eats where we do just that every time we travel on the road. I'm guessing you've seen it. It is we do that every time we do road games, but we've talked about doing something locally, just kind of keep the segment going while we're not necessarily traveling for football all the time. We built up quite a stockpile of those segments while we were in Los Angeles, and then Kevin was in San Antonio recently. So, but yeah, I have a feeling we'll probably get together, and we've talked about Columbus pizza, or
Tony needs to have his steak.
Tony needs to have a steak at some point. Let me check the closest Ponderosa. I'm sure we can find one.
I was going to say, hell, the closest Ponderosa I've seen is in West Virginia.
Let's do it.
Yeah,
Make a stop at the
Scoop Eats. People either love it or they're like, I don't understand it. I mean, it's it's one or the other. I love it because I get to eat.
Well, here, let me explain the segment. Food can be used to nourish your body. It provides vitamins, minerals, calories, which are converted by your body to energy to provide daily tasks. Some food tastes better than other food. We help identify interesting and different foods that you might try and might be interested in to provide this important part of your daily routine. Hope that helps.
Yes, we are here to help. Real quick question before we get
Wahoo Buck liked my sandwich that I had in San Antonio over there at 2M Smokehouse. It was fantastic.
That was a good looking sandwich. I will admit that. Trenton Ewell, Tony, quick question. Does ketchup and turkey belong together? That is a no. Generally, ketchup and any kind of fowl, no. No. Now, turkey burger, sure, of course, obviously. But just turkey, deli turkey, or regular turkey that you're
So you don't put ketchup on your wings?
Turkey wings? No.
No, your chicken wings.
No. Now, what about turkey tenders? That's another question. Do not know. Tom, serenity now.
How about like a Cornish game hen?
Well, of course. Yes. Yes. Obviously. Yeah. So I'm all for a steakhouse. Anytime you guys want to go. And
I know the thing is that we've talked to Mark, and Mark's not sure if he trusts you to go there. And I mean, again, that's a legitimate concern. I mean, we got a reputation to keep when we're out of town.
No, we don't.
Wow.
Did you see the halftime of the national championship game where they brought St. Elmo's shrimp and shrimp cocktail sauce into the press box? That was the biggest FOMO moment of the football season for me. Like, oh, like I'm sure they didn't bring it down to the photographer's workroom, so I didn't really miss out, but you guys missed out, and that was sad.
Yeah, I've never had it in terms of the St. Elmo stuff that everybody raves about. Maybe one day I'm sure like it will eventually happen. You, Kevin, you've been there 15 times, at least. And every time I'm invited, it's like, I can't justify spending like $80 to $100 on a meal. I can't. And it's nothing. It's just something inside of me that is, it's hard for me to overcome that. I'm sorry.
Wow.
Well, here's the question. When's your wedding anniversary? Because what you can do is we could schedule a trip for your wedding anniversary and be like, well, we're going out for a fancy dinner, but it's my anniversary, so it's okay.
It was yesterday.
Oh, well, that's unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
We'll save it for next
Good
year.
timing. Can't. That's the 20th. And I have to do something special at that point. Although I did tell her what I bought. The gift I bought this year was for this year and next year, but it didn't fly. Anyway, how long from Prickly Pear? How long do you all feel Saban will coach Bama? And I've said that once Alabama started scheduling the home and homes against other teams from around the nation, like the year before that starts is his last year. And that may be starting in like 2023 or so. I could bring up their schedule, but I'm sure Tom or Kevin will as I'm talking about it. But I don't. However, this year Nick Saban, and we talked about it on the show. This was a new, different, kinder, gentler Nick Saban. He looked very rejuvenated and not nearly as stressed and angry. And he's 70 now. I don't know, but he looks like he could continue to do this for a while. I just, this is not something he's ever really like doing the home and home. He did it with Penn State like 2010, 2011, and that was Penn State. like Robert Bolden, I believe, started one of those games at quarterback for Penn State, to give you an idea of like, yeah, we'll play those guys. Sure. That's no problem going to Happy Valley. But he's always been the neutral site at the Georgia Dome, or, the Birmingham Airfield, stuff like that. I think whenever those games start, that's probably the year before is when his last year will be.
Well, I have good news. Guess who they play this year at DKR? They play at Texas. So, have we seen Nick Saban's last game? I suspect we have.
No, yeah.
Well, so they have a home and home with Texas starting on the road this year, and then they go to Wisconsin in 2024. So maybe that's Wisconsin really needs to see if they can get that game shifted in November. But so far it's set for Saturday, September 14th, 2024. But yeah, I mean, it does feel a little like he's winding down, and I do kind of wonder if they had won this year.
That's what I was going to say.
Maybe because it was a very different vibe from Nick Saban this year, and he has said this was a team that just needed to kind of be, have its hair brushed and be told that it was pretty and it was okay, and that it would turn into a beautiful swan one day, and that has not been at all how he's managed previous teams. So was that Nick Saban changing, due to something inside Nick Saban, or was that just Nick Saban managing this team in a different way because it was a different kind of team? That's kind of the interesting question, but. Yeah, it feels like we're under 5 seasons remaining, I would say. But I have several times in the past thought, I bet he's kind of winding it down now, and then nope. Then he's back in the national championship game again. So yeah, I don't think I could put a specific date on it, but it does feel like there's a small possibility if they had won that game, he just goes out as goes out on top. And maybe the next time they win a national championship, that's when he does it.
So
that's exactly what I was going to say. When they lost that game, I'm like, well, he's definitely coming back next year, because he's not gonna go out like that. So basically, if you want to get rid of him, then you probably just need to clear the deck. It's kind of like that. You got to let him score, so you have an opportunity to come back and win the game. You might just need to let him win the 22 championship, let him go out on top, and then be gone. I mean, because he's going to be he's such a competitor that he's not going to want to go out on that type of situation, or certainly missing the college football playoff championship game. So when does Alabama win again? Because that might be his last hurrah.
Yeah. And they'll be back in the playoffs next year. I'm sure everybody's expecting that. I was listening to the radio and they're already trying to predict the playoffs next year. Nobody was saying Clemson, which I thought was interesting.
In the Big Me kickoff, I picked my 4 teams. I'll say them here, and then you guys can rip me apart. The first 2 are not going to be a huge stretch, and not in order from 1 to 4. So I have Ohio State, Alabama. I have a second SEC team, but this flies in the face of logic because I have another team from the West. I have Texas A&M making it, because I feel that they're just going to buy their way in. And then my 4th team, I'm not buying anybody from the ACC. I'm not buying anybody from the Pac-12. I'm a big fan of Dave Aranda. I think Baylor makes it.
I think having 2, I can see a scenario where you get 2 SEC West teams in, but it does require the ACC, Big 12 and SEC probably all, or Pac-12 all probably not having a real legitimate candidate, because you put in, we'll pencil in Ohio State and Alabama. Those seem like 2 that people aren't necessarily going to argue with. I mean, without having looked at Clemson's schedule for next year,
and I did this without schedules. I did this
without having looked at Clemson's schedule. That's a possibility. There's not. Unless they're playing a real nasty non-conference team next year, and I don't think they are. No.
At Notre Dame?
At Georgia Tech, at Notre Dame, at Boston College, at Florida State, at Wake Forest. Like, that feels like – we'll see. There's a lot that has to happen between now and the start of the season, but – and it has at felt times like, oh, maybe the wheels are kind of flying off the wagon for Clemson a little bit, where they've lost a lot of guys and they haven't really brought in new people yet to replace them. But yeah, I can see Clemson,
Clemson's
being
replacing
an
a couple
11,
of coordinators.
a 12-1 ACC, a 12-1 ACC champion Clemson is going to go to the playoff whether they're better than a
No,
11-1.
I agree with that. But if
Yeah.
you don't think that anybody's getting out of the ACC better than 2 losses, I mean, and as I said, Clemson is replacing coordinators and everything else, and I think James Skolsky, after 12 years of eligibility, is finally done. And, I think that they're going to – not that he was necessarily their best player, but he was – I mean, he's been there for pretty much the entire run of Clemson being worth a damn. I think that there's going to be – I think they're going to take a step back. I don't see anybody in the ACC taking a step forward. I think we saw the best of the Pac-12 in the Rose Bowl. I really like Utah. I think Utah is going to return a lot. I mean, you lose Britton Covey. You have to buy into whether or not you think year one of Lincoln Riley is going to be this huge turnaround. I don't particularly think it's going to happen in a year. And I think as talented as Georgia is, I don't know if Georgia is going to be quite as special in 22 as it was in 21.
I think you guys are forgetting. Really, this is shocking to me. You're going to kick yourselves. Did you not see that Lincoln Riley has hired Alex Grinch to be his defensive coordinator at USC? Have you guys?
And here I thought
did
you were
miss
going to
that?
bring up a real point that I was going to be like, oh God, I'm so stupid. I can't believe I blew through that. But thank you, Tony. I feel validated.
Yeah, it's Lincoln Riley's got some rebuilding to do because USC has been not really actually recruiting football players for a while, so that's kind of a hole you'll have to dig out of. Utah, I mean, if we're going to look at Pac-12 teams, Oregon's got a new head coach. That's probably not going to happen in year one. Utah opens the season going to Florida week 1 at the Swamp. Utah at the Swamp, like. You want to talk about people who are probably not ready for that heat or humidity. That is probably the case. And Utah has USC at home. So if USC does somehow sneak through, they're going to lose at Utah on October 15th. So yeah, and then they finish at Oregon towards the end of the year, and then would have to win the Pac-12 championship. Utah would. So yeah, I don't think the Pac-12 is getting anyone in yet again. They haven't had anyone in since Washington in 2016, which seems impossibly long ago. Big 12, you want to try and talk me into Texas? Like I'll take the downside on that. Like this is an interesting season because it's like several of the teams that you've just sort of penciled in the past, Oklahoma, Clemson, have had coaching turnover this year and like a substantial coaching and roster turnover. So there is. Could Cincinnati sneak in again? If Cincinnati runs the table again, I mean, they're losing a lot this year, but could they potentially? I think
there's going to be a huge group of 5 backlash. I think that there's going to be some serious backlash. I mean, 13-0 is 13-0. And if you're dealing with a lot, having to put 2 lost teams in or whatever, it may be unavoidable. But I think that. Cincinnati did what it could in its bowl game, and people are going to say, well, see, this is what happens when you put a group of 5 team in there.
Because there's been no other blowouts in the semifinals.
Yeah, can I point out that you're putting a Big 12 team in? Like, if we're lumping conferences in, like, boy, howdy, let me tell you which conference doesn't.
I know, but there's a perception. There is a perception,
and I
there.
agree. I agree with that. But there will be some blowback there, and it's like, well, Cincinnati, you had your shot. Maybe they'll give it to somebody else. But
let's let Cincinnati. You've had your shot. It's Notre Dame's time now.
Exactly. Yes, I think USC will be back before Oklahoma or Texas. Honestly, I think because there so many of these Oklahoma players and other players are just moving over to USC, and I see them. Now, are they going to be able to handle the physicality of a Utah? And
Mm-hmm.
You can't lose to Kansas State and Iowa State at USC.
Exactly. So I think
can I
there's
share
some
my
of that.
hot take? Can I share my hottest take? Like this is like get the barbecue gloves, get the tongs out. This is a little spicy. We have seen the last time Oklahoma is a top 4 team. Like, I don't know what the playoff is going to look like when they expand it. So maybe they'll get in as a lower seed. We have seen the last time Oklahoma is in as a top 4 seed for the rest of this decade. I don't think they're going to do it this year. And then as soon as they go to the SEC, they're going to be 8-4, and then Venables is getting fired in 3 years, and then they've got to start over. I think you have seen the last time Oklahoma's a top 4 seed in the college football playoff for the foreseeable future.
I don't think that's as hot of a take. I mean, I think I can just do that just by being very careful or whatever. I don't need the barbecue gloves. I think that one's pretty right on.
Careful, hot plate.
I'm looking at USC's schedule this year.
Yes, I ran into that in San Antonio when I sat there and cussed on the air when I was doing the scoop eats at Blanco Cafe. Oh, geez, that thing was scalding.
They tell you it's hot. And
I didn't touch it on purpose. It was an accident.
The plate is magma.
The floor is lava.
But before we go, looking at USC's schedule to see how quickly will Lincoln Riley be able to turn them around. Road games at Stanford. Stanford is no good, but Oregon State road game at Oregon State is tough. There's some physicality there. Road game at Utah, obviously we know that. At UCLA, and then they finish the season against Notre Dame. So I don't see it necessarily happening next year for USC, but I don't think it's going to be long before they're right in the mix of the playoffs and they just become Oklahoma offensively and defensively. And whatever threat you want to make that, it's one of those things where when playoffs get expanded, then they can start winning games and it'll, oh, Oklahoma, did you see what they did in the first round? Look out. And, or USC rather. Because, yeah, I think Oklahoma's done. Like, Brent Venables does nothing for me as a head coach. I think Ohio State exposed him in that 2020 game. And honestly, I'm wondering about Clemson now as well. As Kevin said, like losing all these coordinators. Dabo, very rigid about replacing people from within, not allowing spring official visits, not looking at the portal, which he now is finally going to have to do. Like he's going to have to change as other coaches have changed if he's going to keep up with everybody, I think. So are we done? Do we want to go?
I think we're pretty good. We've gone a little over 90 minutes. Okay. We've had as many as close to about 350 people in, 78 thumbs up. If you haven't done that, you're watching on YouTube, be sure to give us that thumbs up. It helps us with the algorithm until they change it again. But for now, hit that thumbs up.
So that will do it. I do want to thank you all for joining us on this random Wednesday afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the contributions. Thanks for spending some time with us, and we will talk to you all later.